All right, welcome everyone to the DCASE panel discussion. I'm Mark Cartwright, and I will be moderating the panel today. But it's a very, informal setting here. We do have sort of a list of themes and some questions to seed the discussion. But if you all want to ask any questions or have any topics you want people to talk about, please ask your questions and raise those topics. So we have 4 excellent panel members today, and they will each introduce themselves. So if you can introduce yourself and tell us how you ended up in the DCASE field.
Now?
Yes, now. Go ahead.
So my name is Frederic. I'm a researcher at the Music Technology Group of Universidad Pompeu Fabra and the Phonos Foundation, which is an institution also linked to the Music Technology Group. I'm basically coordinating the free sound project there, which is all that has to do with the free sound website and research and development around free sound. And I actually got involved with DCASE. I think it was in 2018 when we organized one of the tasks for the challenge based on a data set, based on free sound, and in collaboration with Google. Although in previous years, some of the other members of my group already participated in the DCASE challenges. And yeah, we also hosted the DCASE 2020 in Barcelona, although it was COVID time, so it was basically online. And yeah, I guess that I've been involved since then.
Thank you. Mark?
So hi everyone, I'm Mark Plumbley from the University of Surrey. So how did I get into DCASE? Well, with Mathieu Lagrange, we were coordinating the first DCASE in 2013, together with other researchers like Dan Stowell, Emmanuel Benitos, and various others. So it was actually quite a long process from the beginning. So the sort of ideas from that came in 2011, maybe earlier, when we organised a little one-day workshop at Queen Mary University when I was in London, around this what was awkwardly called non-speech, non-music sound analysis. So it didn't fit with speech recognition conferences, didn't fit with music information retrieval ISMEA conferences. And so that was really where the idea came. And we had a nice little poster session in the corner of the workshop on applications of signal processing to audio and acoustics, WASPA, and really started from there. And the rest is history, as they say.
How many people were at that first DCASE?
I think there was something like 6 posters, and we had to work to get some registrations held out because WASPA is always really popular and a sold-out conference, but the organisers were very friendly to us and held back about 5 or 6 registrations so that people could come along and represent the posters later.
Great. Noboru?
Okay, so my name is Noboru Harada, working with NTT Communication Science Laboratory. NTT is one of the largest telecommunication company in Japan which has research labs with 2,300 researchers working there. So with that company, so being from the industry, I'm working when being here. And also, I have been working with the acoustic signal processing and international standardization work. And also, I have experience and being a human research manager at the Communication Science Laboratory. So being a human resource manager at the basic research lab. And then after completing that task, I started a new research topic. And the thought that time is, what if the noise we are considering now is actually the signal, and the signal we are considering the like a speech or audio music is actually was noise. So if we turn the role around, and what happened? And so we investigated some anomaly sound detection, because his noise is representing some information about the machine condition monitoring kind of thing. And since then, I joined DCASE and started the organizing task 2, so anomalous sound detection thing. So that's the story.
Thank you. Nicolas?
So my name is Nicolas Turpault. I'm an entrepreneur now. I began DCASE in 2018 for the beginning of my PhD, so I have a very small experience compared to these guys. So yeah, I've been organizing task force since 2018, and now I'm doing a startup related to DCASE to help elderly people. It's called SONED, and it's in France, in the west of France, and that's it, I guess.
Thank you. So as you can see, we kind of have a mixture of both academia and industry here, which kind of relates to the first general topic that we wanted to discuss in the panel, which is DCASE from research to business. So the first question I have is, so DCASE methods have lots of commercial applications in various fields, including smart cities, smart homes, multimedia information retrieval, and machine condition monitoring. How do you see in general the market situation of DCASE technologies? I don't know, maybe Nicolas or Noboru would be the best to answer some of these.
I'll start. So just my question is it true? I mean, truly is kicked out. I mean, so of course there are potential business chances existing there, so many things, but actually it's quite difficult to set the requirement and find the killer application, what sounds to the users or customers. So even though we already have some potential technologies, but bringing it to the market is another story, I think. So perhaps you can object.
No, in my case, I completely agree. What I was when I was thinking about this question, the most important thing for me was like most of the application that could be used or really useful are not well defined or not even really well known. So it's really hard to answer this question because it's more about talking to people. What do they really need, and are we able to do it? So I agree with Noboru. It's super hard to like understand what really people like and what really people want. What is a must-have, and so I think we don't even know half of the application we can really do.
So the issue right now is you feel like you don't know enough about the potential users of these technologies?
Yes.
And that you face that as well at
yeah,
NTT?
so especially looking for a killer application that no alternative solution can solve that issue. So that is an important thing.
So what you mentioned other challenges in general. What other challenges do you...
I don't know, but anyway, based on that principle, I bring the monitoring thing. So I think that is one of the potential application scenarios that technologies from DCASE can be sold to the realistic solution.
So for machine condition monitoring, was that sort of you kind of came up with this idea of this inverting kind of noise and signal. Is that something that you came up with and then proposed to your company as like, hey, we can do this as a potential application, or was that driven by like customer needs?
Yeah, actually, mainly it started the both. So our NTT has more than 300 subsidiary companies group, and so some of them has a customer to have industrial requirement that they want to monitor the conditions of the machine. So some guys or some salesperson brought some customers, potential customers, and we start the investigation and how to fix or solve that issue using signal processing or machine learning. So that's the beginning. And while doing several trials, and we found some basic difficulties need to be solved with technology, and then started that task.
And Nicolas, for you, were you kind of starting with the technology and looking for an application, or was your startup that you developed kind of driven by research that you had done with elderly individuals and their needs?
Let's say both of them. At the beginning, at the end of my PhD, it was like, okay, we have technology. We can do many things about it. And most of the people, they don't even know that exists. And so I was just exploring the market, but in very different ways. It could be urban sound applications. It was even like some people told me about some mosquitoes kind of flies into vaults in banks. Then after there was all this domestic sound. So there are many, many options. But then what was really hard is to find, okay, when you say you need that, do you really need it? And is it, am I okay to do it? And is it fine with my values to solve these kind of problems? But what I've seen, to like talk to many, many people, it was really like user-oriented. It was like, okay, what do the users want? Is really, they need some stuff which are sometimes super easy compared to what we do in DCASE. And I'm like, what? But you can do that. It's been 30 years you can do that. And they don't do it. So then you always think, if you don't already do it, is it because you don't really need it? Or is it because you didn't know you could do it? And that's very hard to find out this. And that's really every startup is doing this. It's like where you're going, like you implement and say, okay, if we do that, can it work or not?
Right.
Maybe just to add to that, I think sometimes sound is not something that many consumers or companies will think about as an option or the first thing that comes to their mind. So there are some things that are out there, like the Alexa Guard feature, or I think Google Critical Sounds feature. I think Apple now has Critical Sounds feature in the Apple HomePod. But a lot of people don't know it's there and won't think of using it. And so it's actually, maybe there's a job for us to do to engage people with thinking about sound.
And increasing awareness.
So, I mean, we're here because we're interested in sounds. But I think one of the things we've found by talking to people about sounds in the home and in their environment is that it's only a few people that are really interested in that. Somehow you have to build it as part of a bigger picture to do with well-being or sensing more generally, where sound is part of the solution for a sort of bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add?
No, I was just thinking that it's clear that for what you mentioned, no, like there is a path from the DCASE algorithm, let's say, to the market, right? And this one's very big. But it's also clear that there is an interest or an increasing interest, I guess, from the industry in things like DCASE, and I guess that now, I mean, we can see that for the evolution of the community and also discussions that we had actually in previous years. So I guess that I would be curious and why is this difference so big? What are the main limitations, right? Like, is this something that we are not covering in our evaluation metrics? Is this that the tasks that are really needed are too different from, because they are much more specific, let's say, or much more narrow than what we're trying to do in the challenge? I think that only one of the tasks in the challenge is actually motivated from a specific industry need or closer to the industry, which is the anomalous sound recognition, right? So I don't know if for this task the outputs have been used or it has been useful for the industry, you know, or more applicable, let's say. Another thing would be the requirements in terms of complexity, which are now also like represented in the challenges, but I don't know how close they are to, you know, real requirements. Or, well, I guess there is no answer, right? But I guess that looking at why is this path so long, maybe could bring some ideas.
But maybe I have a question, because it could be a question for all the professors in the room. Is like, how many times do you have people come in and ask you, okay, I have a problem, probably sound can solve it. Could you do something about it, or is there something existing? And how much are you, how many people are coming to you to this kind of problem? Is it often, or is it not at all? That's the thing I don't really get from the outside.
I don't know, as someone who's been a professor for a long time, can you?
Yeah, not very often. I think it's, in one sense, as an academic researcher, that makes it an interesting space for us to work, because it does mean that you've got the space to think about what problems are that you want to work on that are not directly in competition with industry. Because often with the sort of resources and so on, that it doesn't make sense for us to go up head-to-head against some of the big tech companies that have got the resource to go with. But also, many of the things that we want to work on maybe don't have a sort of commercial imperative just at the moment. So one of the things that we're trying to work on at Surrey is how are you going to build things that are going to be of benefit to people, and actually that means asking people what they think and what they want from things. So picking up what Nicolas was saying, that it helps to get researchers out of the lab and talk to the people who might be using it.
Or so I mean, I personally kind of have both on the human-computer interaction side and the machine learning side of things applied to audio. So I mean, I in my research I do try to do interviews and survey studies to kind of understand the needs of people to inform the development of technology. But sometimes that's successful. Sometimes it's you find out things and you're like, you could solve this problem without using any machine learning, and it might not transfer over into my other side of my research agenda, which would be more on the machine learning side of things, right? So. Yeah, but we do need to get out there and talk to people more and kind of find out their needs. One of the things that like just now in the poster session, when I was looking at both the captioning challenge and the Foley sound synthesis challenge, I was asking myself, what are the use cases for both of these technologies? Because I kind of feel like the way both of those challenges are formulated aren't necessarily aligned with, real-world applications. But so, something to think about, and hopefully we can learn more about, people's needs and incorporate those into informing the design of our DCASE challenges and things like that. So getting back to your question though about how often does it happen that someone comes in and asks a professor to develop a particular kind of technology. So it is the way that the Sonic project at NYU was essentially kind of started. So someone approached Juan Bello and asked him, hey, we're interested in learning more about noise pollution is a big problem in New York City. Is there something that you can do in your research to kind of help address this? And then they kind of put together a team of lots of different professors and then hired students and PhD and postdocs and whatnot to address that problem. But, so that is one example of someone asking a professor and then that leading to a problem in DCASE that we can try to address. Okay, are there any questions from the audience about this topic? So do you all see any emerging commercial trends related to DCASE technologies that aren't sort of addressed currently by the community, let's say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if it's meaningful, but I'm reviewing papers about those kind of things, and I think it's not currently addressed by the DCASE, from what I know, is the use of sound as a non-intrusive way of monitoring health globally, like in medical or in when you want to monitor if an elderly people is doing on a daily basis what a human should do. And there is no specific task on that at DCASE.
So what was it in the medical domain? Is that what you said?
Well, medical, for example, in institutions, but also what Nicolas is currently handling, like someone which is assisting someone to live where he used to live, but monitoring the fact that he behaves in a way that he is healthy, I guess.
Thomas?
Maybe if I add to that, so yeah, I have similar knowledge. So we have had some kind of projects which have been, for example, kind of trying to investigate different commercial aspects for sound event detection technology, and one thing that raised for is exactly what Matthew said, and this kind of, I think it could be named, for example, long-term kind of monitoring, because in the DCASE we are working with some short sound snippets, trying to recognize sounds from them. But for example, if we had some monitoring system working continuously 24 hours a day all the time, and basically figuring out if a person does he or she eat, go to toilet, and this kind of things. So of course it could be use the core technology that we are developing, but trying to kind of understand the behavior of a person.
So kind of getting back to something that I think Nicolas was saying before, though. So what do you think are the main differences between technologies and products in academic studies in terms of these, the different technological requirements, et cetera?
For me, the biggest problem is the data and the problem definition. There are two things. I mean, some people here who are my PhD defense, and I've been told that it was surprising PhD. It was not that common because I've worked mostly on DCASE stuff. DCASE organizing task, problem definition, making some data, everything like this, which is sometimes not seen as research. But this is the main thing that you have to do when you go and talk to a user, is explaining your problem. The first thing you have to say is like, am I able to solve that problem right now, in a year, in 10 years? The expertise we have here is actually we can answer this question most of the time, because we know from the DCASE, the paper, what we've done, if it's easy or not to do it. But then you know it, but most of the time you're like, okay, so then we have to collect data, how much or how many, how long would it take me if I want to annotate it? And spoiler alert, most of the time we don't have many data, so that's why I like the task when we don't have a lot of data, annotated data. For example, if you think about habits, what they just said, Thomas and Mathieu, of course, it's super hard to get the habits of people and to get a very big data set of what people are doing. It's super annoying to annotate 24 hours of the day of someone. So if you want to do something about it, super painful. But then most of the people, then we are always like, okay, want to do super good research, super good models, super good solutions. But yeah, it's not that funny to do that when you are in an industry, because you are mostly doing, okay, how do I put my problem so that I can solve it in a fast way and can have data quite easily, and I can fastly solve the problem and then have a V1 later that maybe could have a nicer solution.
Yeah, I think that the data question is something that there's still a lot of uncertainty around what you can actually do with that. In the tutorial yesterday on Hugging Face, there was a lot of mention of data sets that are for non-commercial use, and things that have come from the web. We're used to using things like audio set that's come from YouTube videos and so on. And so we can process that under copyright exceptions in the UK. Presumably other countries can process them in whatever copyright exception or fair use policy you have in your jurisdiction. But there's not something that you could rely on using within a commercial application without the risk that somebody could come along and say, actually, you have to stop using that model now because it was trained on such and such data set. So I think that's that's one of the things that I would be concerned about from a commercial application, that if a company wants to use these type of models, then they really need to know what data you've got and what ownership you've got of that data.
Yeah, I think there's just another lawsuit against OpenAI that was in the papers this morning, I think, right? From some authors suing them for training models on their data, right? So, yeah.
I guess before entering in the copyright debate, because it's not going to end,
Right.
I guess it's true that and there is a trend in research in trying to separate like the training of the big model, let's say, or the idea of the foundational model, right? So the data that you need to learn something about the domain, and then reduce the amount of data needed to actually solve the problem or the downstream task. You know? So I guess that this problem that you are mentioning is something that's being addressed now also from the academia, no? And it's seen as a necessity, and it's also actually related to the copyright thing. So, but yeah.
And then I feel like there's also this kind of concept potentially of like data laundering, right? Where you have a model trained on a lot of data, and then if you use that model to maybe generate other data and then train your models on that, you're kind of getting around potentially some of these issues, but it's not really getting around it, right? We just don't have the laws to kind of enforce it.
Topic is slightly different, or going back to the original question, but since I have the experience as a manager, human resource manager at the basic research lab in company. So since I'm thinking of there are several different levels of the talent required for research, basic research and the development. So let's say inventing something from 0 to 0.1. So it doesn't work well, but no one can recognize that kind of things it can do. So that is the basic research part. And then next step is, if someone already found that 0.1 is doable, then some other talent should be put it on, make the 0.1 thing to 1. And then if you want to bring that technology to the consumer, then some other talent making 1 to 1,000 is required. So perhaps the direct advice to the students or PhD student might be, so they should consider what kind of talent or motivation you are mostly interested in. Then, so if you are very good at creating 0.1 from 0, then you should do a basic research. Or if you are interested in making some nice or cool gadget or solution, and then perhaps you have a talent to make 1 to 100 and 1,000. So there are several levels of required talent or motivation. So that might be the difference between the purely academic research or industrial development. And I'm somewhere in between those. So for customers, time is important. So when you can launch your first service, and which means you need to very quick. So you don't have to provide general good solution, but instead you should provide cheap, easy solution, but it works. So the talent required for that is totally different. So that's my comment. You agree, right?
So that does kind of transition to one of these other questions, which is, many students in the DCASE community will be planning a career in industry. What kind of skills are important for somebody doing R&D work related to DCASE technologies, and what are the major differences to doctoral studies, and can somebody prepare for those during their studies? I don't know. Anyone?
I don't know.
You don't know.
This would be more for you two, I guess.
Maybe just to say, one of the things about the doctoral studies focus is that it's often focused on an individual project that somebody's going to be assessed at the end of it. And so if you're not careful, you can be a little bit to thinking, I have to do this thing and this has to be identifiably mine, rather than actually focusing on solving the problem as part of a team. Because, you know, working in industry, it's a long time ago for me, but, you know, there's a team of people that are working on a particular thing. And yes, we often get that in universities as well, but sometimes there can be a little bit of reticence about sharing your ideas with people, because you have to end up owning that, so you can say in your thesis, I did this thing.
Exactly.
And nobody else did.
You need to kind of develop your own identity as a researcher in order to kind of market yourself after you graduate, right?
But I think even so, that's actually something that benefits academia if you get that right in an academic context. So one of the things that back at in Queen Mary University of London, when we were still doing this in the Centre for Digital Music, one of the things that we were aware that we had to do was to push back a little bit against the rest of the university structures that tried to identify that person won that grant. No, actually it was the team of people that won that grant. And okay, so one person had to be identified as the principal investigator, but actually it was everybody that contributed to it. And so we tend to just say, look, we'll ignore what the rest of the university does. We're going to know that the best way that we're going to work together is to build the right team that's going to solve the problem. And if you can get that team of collaborative people, then you can do something that no other individual is going to be able to do on their own. And so I think that's the thing that's really benefited us, even if it hasn't quite fit into the reporting structures that we had to work in at the time.
So, you're more established in your career and whatnot, but I can imagine if you were earlier in your career, like that would potentially be more challenging to kind of, since the way that you're evaluated and whatnot is more dependent on sort of developing that individual identity in a sense, right? So
you need a supportive head of lab to be able to work with to make that work. So in my case, Mark Sandler previously at King's College London, then at Queen Mary University of London, one of my early funding grants was one where I was the principal investigator, but he was on board as an advisor, so that altogether the team had the expertise in order to manage the project. Because early in my career, I was writing grants, and the feedback that would come back would say, oh, that's a really nice idea, but why is they applying for it? This person knows nothing about that. And so I had to sort of realize I needed to address that by getting together with one or two other people to have the right skills, and then say, look, we're the right people to do it, because this well-known famous professor is on my grants as well, and he's going to help make sure it goes in the right direction. But he's magnanimous enough to let me actually run it and get the credit for it to help me start my career.
I can have an answer if you want for that, because I really love the question. I thought about it a lot during my PhD, actually. So I wrote something. Spoiler alert, the same. Most of the things I will say is probably true for academia. For me, the skills important when you're a student and you want to work in the industry is maybe it doesn't relate. I'm a bit biased for small companies, but it's to really well understand the problem. Most of the people, they will expect you to be the expert. So if you are the expert and someone is asking you, saying, oh, we have this problem, can we do it? And you say yes, but you can't, well, that's your fault. I mean, you are supposed to be the expert saying, maybe not, this is a bit hard, we have to do the hypothesis. The second one was to be able to be very curious. I mean, that's true for research in general, but then to check everything and to see if it doesn't exist somewhere else. Because in the industry, if it already exists and you can use it or use the same kind of ideas, then don't redo the wheel. That is the same in research, right? Then to be able to work as a team, it's kind of hard, this one, because when you're in a PhD, I mean, during my PhD, I was really lucky. I could collaborate with many people, but I've seen many people working on their own. And when we're in part of the team, well, any of your actions are, of course, impacting others. Then there is a subtle thing about coding. If you do a bit of coding industry, well, you have all this thing about continuous integration, MLOps, everything like this, which is not that common in the academia, and that mostly usually the people, the recruiters, they are just like saying, yeah, but if we take a PhD student, he won't be that good with these kind of things. So that's usually why we are not hired for certain positions. And the last one is really like write every of the hypotheses. It goes with the first point, but it's like you can't just expect to have something already prepared in a company. Most of the thing won't be well defined, so you will have to redefine everything. And if sometimes the DCASE is very nice because it seems prepared, so you can use it unconsciously, like many hypotheses have been the researchers behind it like did a lot of hypotheses. They are not well written on the tasks. And this one, when you're in a company and you try to solve a real problem, you have to put all of them on the paper. Otherwise, you'll never be able to explain to your superior or to the CEO of the company saying, why do we do that? Why does it take so long? Well, because we did all these hypotheses, and in real life, it's not the case. So this one, we have to solve it one way or another. So that's all the things that I found really hard, actually, to go one way.
So if you were to go back and redo your PhD, would you incorporate some of this kind of into it at all? Would you do your PhD a bit differently, given your current experience?
Yes, there are definitely many things that I would change, but something that I would definitely not change is how much I was involved in the community and how many people I talked to. Because I was really lucky to talk to many, many people and have many people sharing their vision and their problems, the hypothesis. What I'm saying, like the problem definition was really, really one of the things that I would definitely not change, and all the things about coding I would definitely change quite a lot of things into that.
Well, well, maybe Thomas.
Thomas, yes.
If I'm curious in hearing more about this hypothesis, so Nicolas, can you give some examples?
I have easy ones. For example, for the DCASE dataset, the thing that we've done in task 4, if you are to use the dataset, you're like, okay, it's domestic sounds, cool. For example, when we did the annotation, when there was less than 150 milliseconds between two sounds, we're just annotating it as one sound event. That's very subtle thing. But if, for example, you feel like you have to count one of the events, well, you can't count them anymore because the hypothesis was like we were putting them together. So there were two events, but there is only one annotated. And when you're just like using the data set, you're like, okay, cool. I can use it for domestic sound. I can count them. Well, no, you can't. This hypothesis is very strong. So you will miss a lot of sounds. That's just one of the hypotheses. I could cite you like hundreds of them, but it's very subtle. But I don't know how many of the people who use the DCASE dataset went really into the, okay, do we agree there is this hypothesis when I use this dataset?
So kind of a related aspect to this. So as a professor, you know, so a lot of professors I feel like don't have industry experience. Some do, right? But as a professor, how can you, if your student wants to go into industry instead of academia, is there any, how do you kind of help guide them in a way, if that's kind of their ultimate goal when everything you know is like about academia? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is to come to events like this and talk to people who are in industry and know what it's like.
Okay.
Because they'll be able to tell you much better than I will. I mean, I have some sense, and so I did done a couple of visits to things. I went to, so some of the West Coast US companies to get, but you're just getting a view as an outsider there. You don't get really the sense of what it's like to be really working in the field. I think though picking up the thing about the whys, there is this, I can't remember who mentioned it, the 5 whys thing. Sometimes you need to really push, why are we doing this? And then somebody's like, oh, because we want this. Yeah, but why do we want this? And why do we want, and it's like sort of being a child. And sometimes you'll get to something where they say, oh, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And then when you work out why you need to do that and what would go wrong if you didn't. So, we use error measures a lot, or percentage correct, or F-scores or something. Why are we measuring that? Why we want to measure energy in certain ways. I think it was quite interesting yesterday to see that. And I think those are the sorts of things that, if you're working in a commercial environment, you need to understand that and why you need to solve the problem and who's going to benefit from the solved problem and what results are going to come out from that. Otherwise, you'll end up solving the wrong problem or for the wrong reasons.
I guess also there are lots of internships and things like that. No, nowadays there is a lot of communication and collaboration between academia and industry. And for example, in my experience, the students that have then want to work in the industry, well, I would say that most of them, if not all, they went through an internship maybe in that same company, and at the end, I guess you learn also this set of skills. But I would also like to say that when we were talking about the different set of skills that you have as a PhD student, and then you also need at the industry, in our specific case, and even though we say that there is still a long distance between the DCASE algorithm and the market, we're already very application oriented. Like I guess that, especially because DCASE is based around the challenge. We already have, as you were saying, a lot of hypotheses, data sets, evaluation metrics. Although it's really nice that our challenge, and I don't know how this compares to other challenges really, but every year there are many new things, and this is something that I think that task organizers do really nice, like new data, new evaluation metrics, new concepts added into it. So I think this is great, but it's already very application oriented. And I guess that there is also the question of what other set of skills you need as a PhD to do more basic research, right? Or what type of papers do we have also in the workshop that would require a different set of skills, which I don't know if they are useful or not for the industry, but that I don't think that we should kind of optimize only for industry useful outputs.
Can I comment? So just so as a hiring side, the comment is the company is paying a salary to you for expecting your contribution to make some profit, right? So then just doing good research doesn't mean, I can hire him or her. I don't know. So the motivation is what kind of advantage or talent you have. You should analyze yourself, and then what kind of move of you can make a profit to the company. So having met many people organizing some project, it really helps because you prove that you can manage some making, let's say, DCASE challenge or something, and then that is a proof of you can lead some team. So then you should also have that, good motivation or helping other colleagues to generate some profit as well. So that kind of thing, and also as an internship. So we're making use of the internship. One of course helping our research, but also the finding the new employees. To be employed for our purpose. So one thing is, do I want to work with him or her? Is that one thing? Because if I hired her or him, then he can provide good mood or environmental support or some other kind of thing. So there are so many, as already Mark said. Actually, there are several roles required to complete a team, formulate a good team. So then you should show that you can do this, and this is very good for the team. So if you can explain that well, then of course the one who are examining you is very comfortable hire you, of course. So those kind of things. And another thing is just if you have a GitHub repository that has a showcase, you are very good at picking the latest code and makes it work rapidly. And so that is a very important thing. So yeah, I like to have the student who has a good repository, the showcase of his work, and the code, having looked at the code, it's clean, well maintained, and some, I don't know, some description of readme style or something like. Yeah, so those kind of things are also important. But anyway, so mainly company is paying salary for for some reason, and in return you should provide something. So that might be the.
Maybe I could just pick up about a couple of those things on the. So the internship, I think are fantastic, and they've got a double benefit as well, because when the students come back from their internship, they've got insight into other ways of doing research that's different to the things that you've done in your lab, and often will come back and think, oh, I know how to do this in a better way now. Because they'll have learned.
But I'm not going to tell you because I'm not allowed.
Oh, well, I might not be able to talk about the particular thing. But yes, I know I have a student at the moment on an internship. Oh, I'm having a great time. Sorry, I can't tell you anything about it, which is very frustrating, but I understand. I think the other thing is about the in being employed to help colleagues in the company. And I think if you think about the academic version of that, we're often being funded by public money to do research. And so actually our customer, if you like, is the public. And so we have to do something that gives value to the public, to the work that we do, which is why we publish research and why we make our data and code and so on available so that other people can benefit from that. And as part of my career, it was one of the things I had to choose where could I do research where I would actually be able to make a contribution. And it would be very easy to say, oh, I could fiddle with this sort of problem and have a nice time, but actually that's not of value to anybody. And so I think sometimes we forget that actually what we do is valuable to others.
Yeah, I guess that gets back to kind of one of the original things we were talking about before in terms of like our problems and if they're aligned to, the needs of people and if that matters or not, right? If the goal is sort of that, yes, our research actually matters and the people that are funding our research are the customers, then it seems like that would be really important. However, if the goal is, in academia is to kind of train people, to be researchers, and then they go off into, either national labs or companies or whatever, and then they've learned how to do research, and then they're going to be actually addressing problems that maybe have some impact that's driven by some need, then maybe that's it could be okay that we're just training them as researchers rather than their actual output when they're doing their PhDs being impactful.
Oh yeah, so sometimes these chains are very long. So in academia, we're building the skills for people that are going to go on and do something else. And in order to be valuable to the community, that doesn't mean directly having a societal or economic impact on people. It might mean that you develop some theoretical method that in 30 years' time will allow somebody to solve something else and turn that into that. And one of the challenges that in the UK we have is that part of the assessment of how much research a particular department does, as part of what's called the Research Excellence Framework, is we have to gather these stories together called an impact case study that tries to say how your research led to something over a 15, 20-year timescale. And that's hard, actually, for us to do. But if you're careful and you follow up all the lines, you can actually work some of those things out to say, oh yeah, well we did this stuff on, one of my colleagues did some stuff on sound zones, and that was picked up by Bang & Olufsen, and then that was sold to Harman for cars or something, and then that was licensed to somewhere. So there is this chain of stuff where you could say, yeah, we did this academic research here, and eventually it led to some economic benefit later on. But it doesn't always have to be traceable.
Right.
Sometimes it's you train the people that have the skills to go out, and in an academic department, everything's being renewed all the time. The people that are in my group are completely different to the ones that were in the group 5 years ago.
So getting back to the terms of how we choose what problems to work on and whatnot, like, do you feel like it matters if, should we just be working on interesting problems that could have some unforeseen benefit further down the line, or should we be focusing our energy and resources on problems that we know are real problems and actually aligned to, some particular need, let's say?
You need that to get money as well, no?
But you at least need to be able to tell that story.
Depends on who pays,
But,
right?
I think there are, if you can build a good story around things. I mean, the funding thing is something that, it's really important for research, because somehow you've got to be able to get the funding to be able to do the research. And you need to communicate to the people who are going to be the reviewers. So you need to get that sort of sense of excitement across in the research that you want to do. And it might be that that's because it's a really interesting problem. You don't know where it's going to go, but you just know that it's important to do it. And if you can get that across to the reviewers, then in a way that they'll accept that, then you've got a chance there. Another thing you may be able to say is, look, this is a really important problem. It would benefit these people. Nobody else is doing it at the moment. And that's another way you can do it. So I think you need to sort of tailor that for the particular thing that you want to do. But I think you need to be enthusiastic about it yourself. Otherwise, it won't come across.
Sure, yeah, of course.
And besides, you've got to deliver at the end of the day.
So I guess I get the impression that maybe there aren't any DCASE-related applications which haven't yet received attention in the academic or DCASE community. But given what you guys said before, but please correct me if I'm wrong. And if there are, like, what commercial applications might those be?
Just perhaps we already know that the auto-driving car may require some listening capability, right? So if it's gonna be the full automated, and then so you have a car, but that works without you, so delivering something to some others, and coming back the car with a huge scar and blood looking, and something happened. But perhaps you may want to check what happened. So in this case, perhaps some of the DCASE solution might be fit. So in general, it required. But the important thing is what is a killer application, which part of the system, ecosystem, we should focus on. That it might be the
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I have written grants before, I definitely have used, acoustic sensing for, autonomous agents of, like autonomous vehicles and stuff like that as potential applications. But yeah, we don't really talk about that application at all in DCASE. I guess we really need to kind of formulate that a bit more and develop maybe a challenge around that and get the data to do that. Yes, Vincent?
Yes, quick question. I'd like to ask Noboru, how do you define...
Thank you so much. Just, would you like to define killer application?
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Okay, killer application is the one everybody must use, no other alternative solution. So no one can avoid using that. Yeah.
So it's not actually killing people.
Right.
I gather as much. For like listening in self-driving cars, you consider that absolutely necessary for driving?
I'm not sure, but on the other hand, so of course all the cars are fully automated and connected to the network, and then cars each other can communicate. But on the other hand, we human, if we don't have the mobile phone carried, and then for them, just we're nothing. I mean, so they are. I mean, automobile can watch the mobile phones. I mean, not us, actually, humans. So, for example, or wild animal kind of thing. So we can't control the conditions. So I think we need some listening.
Thank you.
I mean, as is the motivation, lots of DK stuff, there's often visual things that are obfuscated or, too, are occluded and are too far away to kind of observe visually. So, or the lighting conditions are such that you can't see them very well, right? So it seems like using an acoustic signal could
You're not
help.
supposed to drive with headphones, no? Like
This is true, right? There's a reason for that.
In my case, it's probably like a French problem. I don't know if it's. I don't know about the market in general, but one of the applications I really loved when I was exploring exactly the market and see what I could do is the thing that humans are already using sound to do it, and we don't usually know that really well often. Is that, for example, to detect a water leaks. When it's in your house or whatever, we have many techniques. But for example, when it's under big roads, in France, for example, 30% of the water that is being, cleaned, is leaking in big pipes. And so then they have these headphones and these big, how do you call that? The thing that...
Probes?
The thing that's used to the toilet, like in the toilets, you know. No, it's like this. What? Yeah, exactly. Like a plunge. It looks like this, and they do that on the road to see if it's actually leaking, you know. And I was like, wow! I was amazed to learn that. And they actually use sounds, and there are people like paid to actually check that because it's the less expensive solution. And for me, I was like, wow, and that's really when you think about ecological problems and everything, that's super useful. And I'm like, wow, okay, but how can we really solve this problem? But that was one for the applications I saw that sometimes we don't have with DCASE is usually sound is the only solution. For example, the same for trucks. They wanted to check if the merchandise, the things that are in the truck are still in good conditions. And since it's dark, they thought about putting cameras or other sensors. And they're like, okay, but if we put sounds, we should get an idea if something is falling or whatever. So these are like small applications, I would say. I mean, I don't know, but I know that there are some problems. I can't tackle them myself. I would love the audio and the water leak detection.
maybe in the future when your company grows.
Maybe when I have to start another company, it would be water leak detection.
Any other applications from the audience people want to propose? Everyone's quiet? Okay. Okay, so I guess we can move on to the second topic, I guess. So the second topic we proposed to discuss was DCASE data and machine learning models in the era of the EU AI Act, GDPR, and other regulations. So there's a growing trend to develop regulations concerning the use of artificial intelligence, for example, the AI Act in the European Union. And before that, there's been a similar trend in controlling the use of various kinds of data, especially data involving personal information. Both of these affect the DCASE field, since it is heavily based on machine learning methods that learn from data sets. So how do you see this development and its effect on DCASE?
The answer is yes. No, I mean, it's true that maybe we have methodologies for collecting data that maybe need to be like shaped or changed. It's true that there's a lot of uncertainty about how or where things are going, and while Mark was mentioning before some specific regulations that we are somehow applying to machine learning, but it's not like 100% clear that this is how law should be interpreted. So many of these things are changing, but it's also true that I guess there are also solutions in some cases, no? So I guess one thing is whether or not we can use or under which rights we can use data for training models, copyrighted data, for example. I guess then the other thing is in terms of data collection and privacy and the more GDPR. So one thing would be related with GDPR, the other would be related to the EU Act. Well, I'm of course talking about the the EU thing, but I guess it's going to apply somehow everywhere. But yeah, I guess we can be more specific to talk about the individual things. But yeah, that's what's happening.
So in terms of like some of the methods you're talking about for addressing these, I mean, what do you see as potential shortcomings of some of those approaches, let's say?
I mean, in terms of GDPR, basically what GDPR says is that you have to be transparent about the uses of the data. So as long as during the collection process you can actually transmit that information, and then the big challenge is that people is supposed to have, well, no, they have actually the right to then say that their personal data should not be used, for example. So, for example, if you are doing a recording in a public space and you have a sign that says we are recording, and you are already altering somehow the sonic space, but well, you are kind of supposed to do that. And if you don't want your data to be there, you have to, I don't know, call that number or whatever and tell me, the timestamp, and then I will kind of remove that. No, if you want to be 100% compliant, there are these kind of things that and protocols that we should somehow implement. Another way of circumventing this is not storing personal information, basically not storing audio, for example, because we understand that audio can have the conversations and these kind of things. But it's not, I mean, it's not impossible, right? You could also store some sort of representations. At the end, how many different representations do we use at the input of our models? You could store some representations which are supposedly not invertible to recognizable speech, for example. I mean, maybe there are things that could be done there. Also, if you have sensor networks, you can bring also the computation to the sensor itself and try not to send audio to servers or stuff like that. So I think there are different strategies, and depending on the situations, you can maybe choose one or the other. It also depends on what you do with that data afterwards, if you're going to share it and redistribute it or not, because this can also, make differences. No? So, yeah, I guess maybe there is no standard protocol, but we could probably agree on some, points that can be probably useful in many jurisdictions, let's say.
Yeah, I think at the moment the discussion about what you can do with data and how you can use models that are trained on data are really currently being discussed in Europe and the UK. I'm a little bit more familiar with the UK. There was a proposal that essentially any machine learning model that was trained on data would be able to be used commercially, but that caused big concerns for the music industry. So both from performers and composers and so on. And so you've got an issue here where there are creative people who are producing that data, and what will happen to that content, and they're concerned that they will be replaced by AI models that will create things using the value that they've created, but without getting anything in return for that. So I wonder whether there may be some way of licensing AI models somehow, where you can license the use of a data set in the same way as perhaps a radio broadcaster can get a Performing Rights Society license to be able to use that. So there may be ways around it, but I think people are still not really there at the moment. And I think different countries are adopting different approaches to this. I'd read that Japan, for example, had made a statement a couple of months ago to say, actually, any AI model can use data and can be commercially used. But I haven't seen the details of that yet, so I don't really know whether that's true.
I didn't get that information that much in detail, so.
But I think all of there's a bigger question. It's not just about what do the laws say, because the laws are behind where we are. Even the one that we're using at the moment, to be able to, we can release models that we've trained based on web data and the BBC Sounds data set, for example. There's a license that goes along with that says you can use it for personal use, but anything else, you have to do such with it. So we are only able to release a model that's trained on that because we're using a UK copyright exception for data processing, essentially.
But some of those licenses too were sort of developed before, generative models were around, right? So like someone 20 years ago was like, hey, yeah, sure, this music can be, I'm going to release this as Creative Commons. They were possibly not thinking about the implications 20 years later when we have generative music models that might create music in their style, right?
Yeah. So I think actually one of the things that if we're working on generative AI, we need to think about what type of society that we want to create with that. And so it could benefit people who are working in the creative industries by making some of the things easier or making some of the things actually more interesting for people to do. But the concern I think that people working in that area have at the moment is I won't have a job next year because AI is going to come in and, all the library music that goes along with TV programs and videos and so on will just be, generated out of an AI model.
I mean, this is a concern, but it's also true that we don't know how things are really going to progress at the end. And sometimes we think that the law is going to determine the things that we can do or that we cannot, but it kind of should be a little bit the other way, well, not completely the other way around, but I mean, the law will come after. And for example, this EU AI Act, I think it doesn't mention a lot about the training data. It's basically talking about the risk of the technology and how it's going to affect people, right? So it's like you cannot do that because this could be very bad for people. But it's not really tackling, I think, the problem of using copyrighted data. It's also true that for maybe for the music scene, it's clearly more of a problem that in our case, because many of the data sets we have are data that we collected, or for example, many are based on Freesound, which has Creative Commons licenses, although it's also true that the non-commercial licensed sounds should most likely not be used for commercial purposes. But if you take all these like copyright exceptions and the way we are interpreting them, if you make a copy of a sound, put it in your model, and then you remove it. If you use the streaming mode, maybe in Hugging Face that we saw yesterday, then maybe it's fine, right? Because there is this exception that for data processing, what you were saying. So it's kind of a little bit unclear. But I think that we will really see the necessity of how should this be regulated, or at least clearly, when we see where is it going really. No? I mean, is people really losing jobs? Are fully artists going to lose jobs because our task 7? So I doubt it, but I mean their job's going to be transformed for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's this transformation of can we help to feed into that process to say, look, things are likely to transform. How does that mean that we need to, reskill people or change what they do or change the way of thinking about things? But technology has always changed things. I was reading something about the analogy between Uber taxi technology-based stuff and bridges. And once you built bridges, then all the people that used to ferry people across rivers were out of a job because nobody needed ferry anymore because you could drive straight across or walk straight across.
Yeah. Before the Brooklyn Bridge was built, there was like 1,000 ferries every single day.
And so that's a technology that changed things for people, and some people didn't do very well out of that, or you had to find another job from that. So do we have to, as part of the research that we're doing, work with other people to say, look, we're going to be doing this, but you're in the business department or you're in the social science department. Maybe this can be something where you can start thinking now based on what we know might be changing so you can get ahead of the curve rather than waiting for stuff to get bad and then start to fix stuff.
What about research related to sort of kind of attribution models and things like that? Do you think that can... How much do you think that'll address some of these problems? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, let's say it's something, a model generates some output, trying to assess like how much of this input data point, in the training set affected this output in a way, right?
Yeah. So perhaps if we can reverse analyzing the contribution with the input training data samples per output, then the contributor of original input data can get some money paid back, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I like that concept. Yeah.
I mean, it's also true that
It's not a trivial thing to do. But yeah.
all this is also seen as a problem because we come from traditional copyright model. But the other question is maybe this is something that it's inevitably going to change as well, no? As it has been changing since the introduction of the internet and digital music sharing. No? So it's also true that there are several things here that will probably converge somewhere and then move somewhere else, right?
Also, we can think of the analogy with human learning. If I read lots of stuff on the web and learn about how to solve a particular problem, and then go and solve that for somebody
you
at
cannot use it for commercial purposes.
Well, but exactly. So you can't stop me using that and then charging a consultancy fee for something. And but we expect an AI model would need to take that into account, whereas not a human.
But the question here is
scale.
human and machines now. So this is another question, no?
I mean, the difference is scale, really, right? I mean, you could replicate. There can be, immediately just replicate 1 million of you, and that's like a much different story than there being just like one of you.
Right? Well, it's getting interesting.
I think one's probably enough.
Anyway.
But then we'll get to
then
we'll get to this ideal, 4-hour working week or something, where
or 1 day working.
1 day working week, where you just, the machine's going to do your job for you, and you just be on holiday all the time.
Discussion is going places.
I guess we could take it back more to some of the regulation stuff too. So, given that there's kind of this like differing regulations depending on the region that you're in, and et cetera, how do you think we should approach this as an academic community? And should we? I mean, I don't know I don't know the details of some of these regulations, but I can imagine like it can potentially enable some people that live in a place that has less regulation, to kind of have the ability to do certain things in research that researchers in places that are more regulated cannot do, right? Should we sort of adopt as a community sort of certain regulations of our own in a sense that we all kind of agree to adhere to? Or should it be left to be sort of like these various regional regulations? And everyone's kind of on different footing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting idea there about the sort of community ethics, if you like, that many conferences now have some policy statements about how the conference itself is going to be operated and will treat the participants as part of that. And maybe as a research community, we need to think about that as how we operate our research. So if we're doing anything that links to human participation, ranging from having a discussion meeting with a focus group to using Amazon Mechanical Turk or its equivalent, you need to think about the fact you've got humans involved in that process. You need to treat people ethically and fairly as part of that. And it might be that one of the things that this community could do is come up with an agreed set of standards that we would want to work towards. And I think even under when UK was part of the EU and doing Horizon things, which I hope we'll be able to get back to soon now that's agreed again, there is that sense that as a European funded project, you should apply European ethics to things, even if data comes from somewhere else. And that does mean that actually just thinking, I'll use that data set over there because that's been collected and it's got more stuff in it that we wouldn't be able to collect here. You ought to be doing that extra step and thinking, yeah, but actually, is that a reasonable thing to use because it's got personally identifiable information in that? And we shouldn't really be dealing with that. And so, there might be some things where actually as a researcher, the ethics that we apply should make us think twice about those things.
Also, this is something that in the academia is also a set of skills that we, like linking with the previous conversation, that we have to promote, right? That students should have knowledge about these things, so that also when they then go to the industry, they bring this knowledge as well, no? and mindset somehow, I think.
And I think a lot of, at least a lot of universities in the States, I think, have been changing in that regard. I feel like when I did my undergrad and my PhD, like I didn't have to take any ethics courses, but at the university I teach at, every student's required to take, at least at the undergrad level, an ethics course. It's an engineering university, so.
And certainly in say computer vision, things have been changing quite a lot. It used to be, you, can you stand in the middle of this video while we create a data set of stuff? Right. And now you think, oh no, actually, that's an identifiable person, and they haven't signed a disclaimer or as a performance or something like that. So and also it's not very balanced either. So one of the things that actually once you get putting things through an ethics review, how is that representative of stuff? Do you just happen to have white male students in your lab and therefore your data set works for white males and not for anybody else? So, yes, Anna Maria.
Yeah, because this very much relates to the DCASE community and data in general, like identifiable information under the GDPR, the voice is personal identifiable information. So then the moment you are recording something in public, you are recording personal information about people. And can you ask everybody to sign this kind of a disclaimer? We ask you to sign that, yeah, we record you and we will put you online. But can you do that with everybody who passes by? Or I don't know if that, the big sign which says we are recording is enough. And the problem is that because humans are the main thing making sounds,
Yeah.
An environment without speech and without the people is very artificial.
I think. Sorry, no. Just to answer, in our case, for example, for a project we did that we would be like doing some recordings in the street, we went through an ethics process with the university, and at the end, which I'm not sure. I mean, it was quite strict, although I don't know if they like base their decisions on some like higher level law or something. But basically, we didn't need to get signatures of people, but we needed to advertise that we were recording, which is already, making an interference. And we had to offer the option to remove their personal data. So there was basically a sign that people they could follow, and of course no one did. But Thomas.
And if I really think ahead, like how things would be in, let's say, 50 years. So okay, we know currently that the person can be recognized by his or her voice. But when machine learning techniques develop, for example, if a person is passing by, can we recognize from the footsteps that that person has certain disease, for example, and
or even if they're identifiable from their gait, for instance.
Yeah.
Then we won't need to collect more data because we will have solved all the problems. No, but I guess it goes in the same direction. No, what GDPR tries to impose is that we are aware of the data that we use and that we are transparent. So it means that we will have to be more strict in how we treat data and these kind of things. But that's something that we have to already start thinking about, no? So that we can continue our research, right?
For me, there are two things. How can we do anonymization of the data, for example, and difference between anonymization and pseudonymization? I guess most of the researchers here, we don't care about who it is. It doesn't change our research. We don't want to know who is the person. So, for example, if we could anonymize the voice or change it somehow so we can't know who's the person behind, could solve a problem, but then that's for other researchers. Maybe some of you work on that in the room. And the second one is like, what blocks in the data that you collect to be able to use them? For example, we were talking about consent to people and stuff. Most of the time, when we are in research, or even at the beginning, when we're trying to do a new project in a startup or in a big company, probably the same, say, oh, there are some data available. And we are just frustrated that we can't use it. But that's the way it is. We can't use it. Can we do a process to collect them? Most of the time, yes. And that is okay with GDPR or the different laws, and we can just ask people. It's just that everybody is annoyed because it takes time and it costs money. But it's always the same. What do we want to do? It's the same. I have this big thing in the project I'm doing is that we call privacy by design. So from the beginning, you can already think about privacy in the way you make your problem, your hypothesis, define the problem. Yeah, okay, it costs more money and it's really annoying in many ways, but at least you're sure that at the end it respects privacy. So I think it's always a balance between what you're okay to do, to go in that direction, and sometimes saying, okay, we can't do this research right now because we'll have to collect another kind of data, and maybe we'll be able to do that in 5 years. Is that okay or not? For me, that's fine. I think everyone has his own opinion about that.
Yeah, it depends on the problem, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I wonder how the researchers in Europe is thinking over some law is stopping your research, and which means some other country, I mean, researchers go far beyond what you are doing now, and then they provide some services using some different data set. In their country, it's allowed, and then perhaps they start a business and collecting yet another data from users living in Europe, and so that might be another risk to stopping improving your technology by stopping collecting the data. So how you're facing that?
Well, I mean, the idea of these regulations is they should make sure that the technology that we develop is good, I guess, for us. No? So I guess the question is that maybe this technology is not improving our life according to these regulations and this mindset, or at least, I mean, that's something very hard to evaluate, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I guess that the result of these things is that we should be doing things better, if that's even possible to quantify.
So we should develop some sort of guidelines as a community.
Well, I mean,
comment?
Sure, but yeah. I mean, I think that's what's kind of eventually going to happen. But what I mean is that we shouldn't see these regulations as a showstopper, right? Or as a problem. We should, I guess, embrace them and try to, yeah.
Can I comment?
Yes.
One thing, we have to step back a little bit when we are talking about this thing about privacy protection and GDPR and everything. We are, most of us, very lucky to live in a free country in Europe, and we have GDPR, which is the most strict way of controlling privacy and these related informations, because men are quite creative when creating things for controlling people and recognizing who is where and when, if they want to do that kind of things. So I think that in research we should always think about also the purpose, why we are doing and what this thing can be applied for. For example, there are hours and hours of voices of people like Joe Biden or Ronald Reagan or some other well-known people, of public people, or Eva-Kaarina Volanen or Lasse Pöysti. Everybody knows his voice in Finland, if you have heard fairy tales when being young. And these kind of voices is easy to use because they are already there. But when you pick up people from street who are not living in public life, or people who are, for example, active in politicians or something like that, then you have to protect their privacy and not collect the data, and so that they know if they can continue this kind of life. If they have chosen a public life, then they know that they could be recognized everywhere in the world. But if you choose other kind of career path, then you don't want to be recognized. And I think this is where the question of what can we do and what we can't do comes to life. Or if you're a pop singer and you're just saying that I can't use voice of Popeda because although everybody has heard the voice already and it's everywhere, so that's just ridiculous. But when you go to protecting people's privacy, that's another story. And when we are talking about this DCASE and automatic recognition, we have to remember that we can use this to good or to bad, and we have to always be careful to use this in good. And I had one other thing in mind when you were talking about what kind of things your students should have when they come to industry. I left university 20 years ago, and most important thing is to finish what started and have some basic skills. No various things. I didn't do anything like what I did in my PhD studies. I didn't really find out research topics, but I compensated it by finding many research topics, so I could make a thesis out of them. And after that, the most important thing is that when starting to work on something, I can also finish and I can think myself. I don't only expect somebody else to tell me what to do, but have some kind of ideas of my own and then finish what started and hope to find new places and new things where to use my skills. And of course, it's a good thing that when you come to an industry as a newcomer, you also know how to behave, but that's another story.
That also applies to academia. But but it's true. I was thinking it before. Like this is also one skill that everyone has to promote. You know, be nice to people, be a good teammate. You know, and this is really important, right?
I guess that's the first thing that when we are hiring people right now, it's just like what you check. The first thing is the soft skills. Like, is the person is going to be well in the team? I mean, yes. You can be like the killer of your domain, but if you work alone, you can't even talk to others. And what's the point of hiring? Can I just talk about what she was saying? This famous analogy that we always always use for. AI is just a tool at the end, and what we are just building is just a tool. I agree about how can it be used? It goes back to problem definition. I mean, what problem do we solve at the end? But the analogy is always with a knife. Okay, a knife, I can use it to kill people, but I can cut vegetables. Then after, if you think, okay, I will do a bigger knife, and then it will be a sword. Do I really cut vegetables with a sword? Really, but you see, that's the thing of okay, how do you define what's the usage of it? If someone is building a sword and saying, yeah, of course, I cut vegetables with it, come on. Really, do you really believe in it? So it's more about values that we have as a community, and I think the values are quite well shared. So I guess it's fine.
And it links to what you were saying, I don't know, 1 hour ago, that. You have to think about the problem, and if you are just following the DCASE challenge task, whatever, and your PhD it's improving on the task only, maybe you are missing some of this more out of the box thinking that can also bring all these questions, and that's also that's something that we have to encourage, I guess.
Matthew, did you want to say something?
I have a comment.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you at that.
No, you're good. I was just wondering about, because I think when you're talking about privacy and all that stuff, I'm an Easterner, and it feels a very Western idea of privacy and all that stuff, right? In India, at least, we don't care much about privacy, and so I'm just wondering about. If you have any perspective from the other side of the world of what does the privacy should look like? Just wondering. I don't have any comments to make, but I'd love to hear.
I think there's a question about it. It's what do you think about privacy?
Yeah, because a lot of the values that you spoke about, I think many of the things are Western in a way. I don't know if I'm even making any sense.
I mean,
Yeah,
completely. That's
I do?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think that that there is there's this acronym WEIRD for which I think stands for Western Educated Industrial Rich Developed Countries, and I think because of the history of the DCASE community, it's sort of grown up in that context. And so it may well be that accidentally many of the people in this community just assume that everybody in the world shares the same values without actually thinking about it or without asking other people about it. The sorts of things that have happened in I was at an Internoise conference last year, and there are World Health Organization standards on expectations of sounds, and they get adopted by other countries, but they're not really appropriate for other places because the way that cities are expected to work, or the way that a park is expected to work, doesn't have those same assumptions about what sound levels should be and so on. They come from a European or an American perspective, and they just get adopted internationally. So I think it is something that I don't think this community has really addressed yet, and it probably needs one or two people to remind the community that actually we shouldn't just assume that European privacy assumptions or expectations are going to be shared by everybody, and that means that we probably need to embark on a broader discussion about, is this right for everyone, or are there differences, and if there are significant differences, how do we take those into account?
Just like a comment. So if India doesn't, have an issue of the collecting some data, and then it's your business chance if you are living in India and develop a very good AI stuff, and while Western guys are struggling with some part, but you can develop something, and then you can provide a good service, and everybody gonna use. So that's how.
That's the killer application.
Yeah. If there is a killer, and then everybody can be cool.
I mean,
the follow-up question would be, when you're talking about ethics, would you be okay using that data for your applications?
This is Mark was mentioning.
Would you what, sorry?
Would you use that data?
So-
Mark mentioned this, that you have to have your standards of how you use the data.
Yeah, so within a European context, if a European research project wanted to use that data, then it should be thinking about how is that appropriate use. And there are expectations about people that have gone round and made recordings of community songs or something somewhere, and then you get back afterwards and you think, actually, was that appropriate? There's a historical record of something that perhaps that was important, but actually the people that were recorded owned that and will have a view about what they would like to do with that recording. And you shouldn't just make assumptions. Now, it might be that, I haven't really given much thought to this yet, but it might be that actually it could be okay if expectations from, let's say, India, if that's what you said, that nobody expects to have privacy, therefore, well, that's fine, we'll just use their data because nobody's going to mind. But it doesn't feel quite right somehow from a European perspective. And I think I'd be interested in having a discussion on that to really work out what the right thing is that we should be doing with any data like that. Yeah.
So.
Much more deeper than just a paper of values that we want to follow, I guess.
All right. Well, we're a little bit over on time now, so if you want to continue this conversation, we can do it. You can do it offline. But thank you to the panelists, and what's